Welcome back, everybody. I hope that you are making your way into the spring season with a bit of joy and excitement, not because the world is as we want it to be, for sure, but rather because we have some exciting things that we're trying to do here. We're trying to build and uplift and try out some new things. And part of that has, of course, meant this sermon series for the season. That has been a bit difficult because I think it's important for us to truly go through versions of wilderness and exile in our world, which will help us to experience the possibilities contained within the Easter moment and Easter season. So may it be. This last Sunday, I talked about women in the church, and specifically the treatment of women in society at large in places where patriarchy has emerged and solidified itself. And of course, that hits home for many of us because patriarchy insisted on itself in places like the church, perhaps no place more than the church even. If I was trying to figure out how to say that. I mean, the church has sort of doubled down on it, unfortunately. And that means the language we use to talk about God, the language that we use to talk about service and leadership. For a long time, those that were in positions of power or ministerial leadership were men. And so I tried in my sermon to reflect on some of the tragic irony in the history of the church, because early on, you have an abundance of women leaders who are acknowledged as such, who are teachers, guides, they instruct, they facilitate, they do everything. And Paul acknowledges this in the early church in the first century. And even beyond that, we know that they operated in positions of leadership and management early in the church. But unfortunately, it didn't take very long for them to kind of get pushed out, silenced, made invisible to an extent. They certainly were not a featured part of the church's story. And that persisted, unfortunately, for quite a while. I also spoke about the fact, and I didn't perhaps emphasize this as much as I thought I was going to, but in the, let's say, late medieval, early Reformation period, there was, for lack of a better word, a bit of a witch hunting craze, and you had a lot of changes societally. So there began to be the practice of enclosure. Enclosure was where those with wealth and power would close off land that was being used, if not inhabited by, persons that would have been considered peasants, right? People that did not have the means and depended on these wilderness areas for food, sustenance, medicine. And along with those enclosure areas, there was also the displacement of healers, also known as midwives, who were dependent on what they found in the forest for the provision of care. Now, the church found a way, though, to begin to push them to the side. And in fact, they were really suspicious of these women healers. They began to be called witches. So if they were performing their duties as caregivers and healers within the community, the church saw them as an attempt to usurp their own authority. So it was competing authority. And many of us have probably heard some pretty terrible tales. And I thought it was important that we remember that, because it's not that long ago. I mean, you have the 1500s and 1600s, this stuff is happening. And of course, at least here close by, we've heard of the Salem witch trials. And so it's, in the kind of world historical perspective, it's not that long ago. And then, of course, you look in areas like to the south of where we currently live and other parts of the world, women are continuing to struggle for equity, not just in terms of pay, but just in terms of representation and leadership. And we have work to do here in Canada as well. I asked the question if there had been a woman prime minister before when I first arrived. And so there's clearly work to be done here. But I believe that I'm in a place, and I'm certainly in a community at FSA, where we are committed to doing what needs to be done. We are acknowledging the shortage that has existed historically, but the United Church itself has made a lot of efforts in the 20th and 21st centuries to correct those historic wrongs and achieve at least equity in terms of ministerial representation. We recognize that there remains a degree of pay inequity throughout our society, and we're working on that. And we're trying to educate people and increase awareness about that because we want to help move in the direction of a world where everyone does have the opportunity, regardless of gender, race, sexual orientation, gender expression. I mean, that's part of what it means for us to say we are affirming. It means that's the world we not only affirm, but want to be a part of co-creating. So I hope you were able to take something with you from my reflections this past Sunday, as I've tried to offer something a little bit each Sunday as we lead into this coming Sunday, which is part 5 of this 5-part series, and it's going to be focused on mental health and the ways in which persons who suffer from mental health are made invisible or displaced in their own way. So I hope you'll tune into that, and of course, come back here for a bit of a reflection the following week for this postscript. Thanks for joining me today. I look forward to seeing you next week. Bye.